بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد Inshallah, we are going to continue with our discussion about Zakah. And we talked about the importance of Zakah, the eligibility of Zakah. Now we are going into the condition, the explanation of the condition of Zakat, what type of wealth, what type of people, giver and recipient both. Inshallah, today's discussion will be on that. So conditions for the one giving zakah. So the person who is giving zakah, for him to be zakat, for him to have the ability or have the mandatory condition for this person to be able to give zakah or has to give zakah. Number one is freedom, meaning you have to be a free person. So number two is Islam. So zakat is only obligatory upon Muslims. Number three is the age of puberty. And this is according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi. Whereas the rest of the Imams, they say that the guardian must give the zakah on behalf of a minor if he or she possesses nisab. So if you have children or if there is a children that are orphan and they have enough wealth that are zakatable, then the guardian will have to take out zakah from their wealth. Number two, if you have your own children, and let's say you have gifted something towards them, right? Let's say it's gold or some amount of money that they have, which is up to the nisab. Now, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, puberty, meaning bulughiyah, is one of the conditions. So if the kids are not baligh, then they don't have to give zakah, even though they possess wealth more than the nisab. According to other a'immas, they say that if they possess wealth more than nisab, then they still have to give zakah, or the guardian needs to pay zakah on their behalf. Sanity, a person has to be in complete sense, in his senses. If a person has, is in the coma or something, and he is not able to gain his senses, then zakah does not become obligatory upon him. Ownership of nisab, whatever the amount that you have in money, you have to have the full ownership of it. If you don't have the ownership, then zakah does not become obligatory. The wealth has to be free from exhaustive debt, which means that if you have a mandatory debt, and then we are going to get into discussion about what types of debt are mandatory and what types of debt are not mandatory. So if you have a debt that needs to be paid off, the wealth has to be surplus of that debt to be able to have zakah mandatory upon you. Each adult must pay separately. So if all of these conditions have met, then let's say you have 5 people working in one household. 5 people working in the same household. And each of them working and they have wealth according to nisab and more. All of the 5 people need to pay zakah on their own. Or one person can pay on behalf of everyone. But it cannot be that only one person or the household main person pays zakah and the rest of them are exempt. No. Zakah, it's a personal ownership and has to be paid personally by every person who has met the requirement. Okay, when we talk about the debts, that what type of debts are necessary and not, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi and Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, the absence of debt which is necessary, thus they are deductible. And according to Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi, the absence of debt that are not necessary, thus they are not deductible. So according to Imam Shafi'i, even if you have debts, you still have to pay zakah. If you have money to do so, the debt will not be deducted from your wealth when you give zakah. According to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, you can deduct the debt from your zakah, and that is only that type of debt and loan that is necessary. That is you have to. It is something that you were not able to escape from. Okay, the type of debt that can be deductible, okay, from the wealth before paying your zakah. Price of goods purchased, rent dues, utility bills and units already consumed. wages due to employees, mahar owed to wife, taxes that are due, personal debts, commercial loans minus the interest. So if a borrower to buy zakatable assets like raw materials or finished goods, etc., they are deductible. But if person borrowed the money to buy non-zakatable assets like machinery, then they are not deductible. This is for the business. If you are investing in raw material, then those are going to be deductible. But if it's machinery, let's say if a person has purchased a machine to produce some products, so now that machine, it's going to be added into the zakat item, and it will the loan of that machine will not be deductible because it is not a raw item. It is something that is producing a raw item. So those will not be deductible from the amount of money that you have to pay zakah. Now, are those items zakatable or not? That's a different thing. So let's say if you have a machine that produces things for your business, so is that machine will be counted into your assets when you are going to give zakah or not? No, that machine will not be counted into your assets when you're giving zakah. The production, the wealth that is the things that are being produced, those are the things that will be. Let's say if you have 50,000 worth of production that was produced from this machine, so that $50,000 of worth of production will be part of your business assets, and they will be taken into zakat consideration. Similarly, those debts that may be are the mortgage or student loan minus the interest. So there are differences between Islamic finance and mortgage, regular conventional mortgage. In Islamic finance, when you deduct the amount, you're not going to deduct the entire amount. Let's say you bought a house for 300K. Now you financed the amount of 200K from that 300K house. Now you owe 200K. But you're not going to deduct the entire 200K each time when you are paying zakah, because these are month-to-month dues. So you're only going to deduct 1 year of amounts from this year to the next year. Let's say I'm going to pay $25,000 towards my house. So from my entire savings, I'm going to deduct that $25,000, and the rest of the amount will be considered as zakatable. Similarly, so now if you have a mortgage, if you have a conventional loan, the difference between the conventional loan and Islamic finance is, in the Islamic finance, you will deduct the entire amount, the principal as well as the profit. In the conventional loan, you're only going to minus the principal, not the interest, because the interest is something that is not permissible to have. So when you don't have the interest, when you have the interest, that is something that you're not supposed to take. So you will not include that into your wealth. So Islamic finance, you're going to count the principal as well as the profit. And then from that entire amount, so let's say if you're paying $2,000 a month towards your house payment from an Islamic finance, and from that $2,000, let's say $1,000 is towards your principal and another $1,000 is towards the profit. So you will deduct the entire $2,000 and plus multiplied by 12, which is 12 months of payment, and then you will deduct that from your savings. The rest of the amount you will be giving zakat of. Now, in the other side, if you have a conventional loan, in the conventional loan, you are only going to deduct 1,000. You're not going to deduct the entire 2,000, because the second 1,000 is towards the interest. So interest cannot be added into your debt. It can only be the principal that can be added into your debt. We're not talking about the permissibility of that. We're just talking about the calculation of zakat, how zakat is calculated. Okay, now, conditions for the wealth. The wealth must be zakatable. The wealth must be equivalent to or greater than the nisab, zakat payable amount after the deducting of debts. So after you have deducted, so let's say if you have $30,000, $30,000 of savings, and from that $30,000 of savings, your monthly payment, if you calculated which you pay towards your house for the entire year, comes up to be $28,000 or $29,000. So now you have only $1,000 remaining, right? So that $1,000, it's not equivalent of nisab, so there is no zakat due upon you, okay? So let's say if you have $50,000 and $29,000 goes towards your for your 1 year house payment, so the remaining amount you will have to pay zakat of, okay? So, and if the remaining amount is less than the nisab, then zakat is not mandatory upon this individual. Another condition for zakat to become obligatory is the lapse of a lunar year. So an entire year, the amount has to be in your possession. Now, zakatable wealth. What kind of wealth are zakatable? Number 1 is gold. Number 2 is silver. Number 3 is currency in use. It can be from any country. If a person has currency, even though he doesn't live in the country, but he has a currency of a different country, it's still zakatable. Business goods or stocks in trade. Agriculture produce, and then that produce has a different format. How are you going to give zakah on the agriculture produce if you're working towards that? Livestock, grazing, or non-owned open pasture. So animals. If you own animals, then as many cows or goats or so on you own, and if it's for business purposes, then they are zakatable. Treasure troves. If you have treasure, or if you have found treasures, then of course those are types of items that are zakatable. Okay, regarding gold and silver, if any form, if gold and silver is found in any form, raw or in the form of coins, cutlery, utensils, jewelry, all of them are zakatable. For whatever purpose, whether it's for investment, novelty, decoration, personal use, in all of these forms, gold and silver will be considered as zakatable. Both must be at least 50% pure. So the gold or jewelry that you have has to be this much amount of pure. If it's 75% other materials and 25% is gold, then they're not zakatable. With gold is 75% pure. So if it's silver, then 50% pure. If it's gold, then it's 75% pure. Then they become zakatable. There is no zakat on any other material regardless of their value. So if you have platinum, diamonds, rubies, none of them are zakatable if they are for personal use. But if they are for business use, then they are zakatable. For currency, whatever types of currency, whether at home or in the bank of any currency, any country's currency that you have used, cash deposits or set aside for, let's say, for Hajj or even for marriage purposes, all of that will be considered as zakatable. Deposits in trust account, rent from real estate, if it's found, if it's in savings, they are zakatable. And then receivable debts. So if you lend someone money and now they're going to pay back to you, let's say after a few months, and now your zakat is due, you're going to count that money that you have given to someone. Why? Because those are zakatable items. All right, the debts that are receivable are of different types. Okay, loan, advance with hope of repayment. Okay, if you have hope that they're going to pay you back, then you have to pay zakat on it. Receivable form from the sale of commercial goods. You've delivered the goods, now this person is going to pay you the amount. Now that payment has been delayed, but you know for a fact that it's going to come next month. You are going to pay zakat this month. So you are going to count that amount in your zakat money before taking out your zakat. One may, however, pay zakat after they are received, but in that case, zakat of the previous years will also have to be given. So let's say if the payment's going to come in 3 years. Now, you have two options. Either you can pay zakat every year, or you can wait until the 3rd year when you receive the amount. At that time, you have to pay zakat for all the 3 years that you have missed, because that money was in your ownership. The followings are not zakatable unless they are actually received. Number one, loan advance without any hope of repayment or without proof. So you don't know if this person is going to pay you back or not, and there is no proof to claim it. So this type of loan you don't have to pay zakat of until you receive it, and when you do receive it, at that time you have to pay zakat for that. Use personal belongings sold and awaiting payments. So you sold the items, but you are awaiting payments, and you don't know if the payments are going to come through or not. Wages, fees, and other type of services that you're going to receive. Once they are received, then at that time the zakat is made mandatory. Mahar owed to wife, and then she has to pay zakat on that. Or if you owe to someone, then she has to look into that my $2,000 of mahar is still remaining, so she has to take out zakat on that. Inheritance shares. So this is when you receive it, then you are going to pay zakat on it. Same thing with mahar when you receive it. Now inheritance is something that you don't have to pay zakat on it in the previous years, because inheritance is given at the time when someone passes away. So at that time when you do receive the inheritance, and that's going to be added to your savings, and at the time of zakah, you'll have to pay for that. Amount deduced from wages without consent or choice from the employee. So that is, if it's received, then you have to pay zakah. If it's not received, then of course there is no zakat. Business goods. Anything bought with the intention of reselling. When you buy something with the intention of reselling, that is categorized as business goods. Let's say if you bought a property, and your intention was to buy this property, and when the prices go up, and then you want to sell it, so this will be considered as the property of business. So every time when the year of zakat comes, this property will be valued at its current value, right? Even though you bought it at a different value, but the current value will be considered, and then zakat will be given. So let's say you bought a property for $25,000. Now, next year, the prices went so high that the property value went up to $50,000. Now you're going to pay zakat on that $50,000, not the purchase amount that you have paid, the $25,000. This is only when you have made the purchase of the land with the intention of selling it. If you have purchased the land with the intention of building a house on it and renting it out, okay, then that property is no longer zakatable. If you made an intention to buy a piece of land to build your own house, then of course it's not zakatable. If you made an intention to buy a house, build a house, and to give it out for rent, then that's no longer zakatable, because you haven't bought the property just to resell. You bought the property to work on it, and then that house will be considered, and whatever the rent comes out, that will go into your savings, and that rent will be considered as zakatable. So if at the time of buying the intention is to resell was not made, it will not be a business good. If the intention to resell was not made at the time of buying, but later on a person changed his intention and wanted to resell, it will still not be categorized as a business good. So you bought a property with the intention of building house, and then the next minute you saw that the prices of the properties are going very high, and now you made an intention, next year I'm going to sell it and make double the profit of it. This is not zakatable, because at the time of purchase, your intention was to build a house on it. So whatever intention you have at the time of purchasing, that intention will count, even though your intention changes in the middle. Now let's say if you bought a land with the intention of business, and later on you change the intention to make it to personal use. So the minute you change the intention, the condition changes. This is no longer zakatable. Now you can have it for a personal use. Okay, so now when we talk about stocks, now in stocks you have different things. Let's say you own a stock for certain companies. Now how are you going to take out those shares? Shares bought for long-term investment. So first you have shares bought for capital gain. So the market value is zakatable. Whatever the market value is, you will give zakat on it. Then you have the shares which are bought for long-term investment. The non-zakatable assets of the company may be deducted from the market value. So what are the non-zakatable items that are in the company's value? Number one is the buildings and the machineries. So usually in a company, the machinery and the building, they go towards 60% of the entire asset. So the remaining is the 40%. So the 40% will be considered as zakatable, which are going to be manufactured goods, raw materials, and cash, whatever assets that company owns. So you will deduct the 60% and you will give zakah on the 40%. So let's say from $100, 60% you will give zakah on the $40 that is of your share of that. So if you are, let's say you are owning 10 shares, 15 shares, you will continue, you will add up all of those shares, you will take out the 60% which goes towards building and material and machinery, and then you will give zakat on the 40%, and that is going to be the manufactured goods, raw materials, and cash. These are usually the shares that are considered zakatable. The remaining portion is not considered zakatable as it is in any other business. Now let's say if you own a share, first of all, you're not allowed to own a share which is completely investing towards haram. So let's say you own a company, let's say a liquor company's share. Now the entire amount is not zakatable because what you're owning is haram. Zakatable items only come in when the earnings come into halal. Okay? When you have the earning goes through halal thing, then you have the zakatable items, right? Of course, if you pay zakat, then that's a different thing. But first of all, you have to make the money halal to make it zakat counting. Otherwise, you will give the money, zakat will not count because it has to be from a halal source, halal income. Okay, regarding the retirement funds, let's say you have 401k, you have IRAs, these are all zakatable, right? Because they are in your ownership. Now, there are two types of money that is invested. One is your share and one is the matching of the company, okay? Now, the entire amount is yours. So let's say you put 60%, the company puts 40%. This is 100%. Now, the entire amount that is found in 401k or in IRA, all of those things are your ownership. However, the ownership is conditional. What is conditional? That you can only cash out at a certain age after you retire, or at a certain time you can cash out. You cannot cash out before that. So now, ulama has given two opinions of this. How are you going to take out zakat of this? The first opinion is that you will take the entire amount. Let's say you have $40,000 in your 401k, okay? Now that $40,000 in your 401k, if you were to cash out today, you will only get 20% or 30% of that, okay? The remaining percentage will go towards taxes and early cash out penalty. So you will deduct the early cash out penalty, you will deduct the taxes, and whatever 40% that is in your possession, you will use that and add it to your saving, and then this is how you will give zakah. So let's say you are getting only $5,000 from an early cash out from your 401k, you will take that $5,000, add it to your savings, and then you will give zakat on it. The second way is doing this is you don't pay zakat on it at all. When you cash out, and at that time you received, at that time you will calculate that this much amount every year, how much was I had in my 401k, right? So let's say at the end of your retirement, you got 100k, okay? And you work for this company for, let's say, 20 years, okay? So in that 20 years, each year, how much did I have in my account? So let's say for the first year, I had 5,000. The next year, I had another 5,000. So you will count each year, and then you will pay the zakat for all the years that you have, because this was a long-term receiving of payment. So after when you receive those 20 years, you will pay the zakat. Now, let's say God forbid, if someone dies, right? Someone dies, he had 401k, but he dies. So however that is distributed, he will not be held accountable on the day of judgment for not paying that zakat because the amount was never received. Zakat only becomes mandatory when the amount is received. When the amount is not received, zakat is not mandatory. So if a situation like this comes, this person is forgiven in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the pension plans are not zakatable until they receive. This includes any such funds that an employer invests in by deducting from the wages without the employee's consent. So whatever the amount that is added into your pension funds, those are only zakatable when you receive them. Okay. Now, so this is up to the debts. Now we're going into the trust, ownership. So let's say if a person has a family trust, who is responsible for paying zakat? A lot of times for inheritance purposes, people build family trusts. So this entire assets of this family is devoted into a trust. And then you have the trustees, the first person, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. And the reason why people make those trusts, so that when a situation comes that someone dies, the entire wealth is protected and goes to the family members and not to anyone else. So if the trust is made for family purpose, then the person who is owner of all the assets that are put into that trust, he is responsible to pay zakat. Okay? Now, if the trust is built for business purposes, then every individual has the responsibility to pay the zakat of the amount that he owns from that trust. Okay? So if, let's say, if a person has 25%, the other guy has another 25, 4 people has 25. So each individual is responsible for his 25% of paying the zakat of that amount, of that wealth which is in that trust. Now, in all other cases, the zakat is payable by the beneficiaries of the trust in proportion to their respective shares. So if you have people that are owning different amount of shares in the trust, then every individual is responsible for that amount which he owns from that trust. This is how the trust will be taken care of when it comes to zakat. Now let's say pledges and deposits. Any zakat asset, cash or gold, that is pledged to a creditor as a rahan, it's not zakatable. So let's say if you have some money or gold and you give it to someone, that can you hold this, and you borrow some money from him, I will pay you back and collect this valuable from you. So that's not zakatable because that's rahan. It's not in your property and it's not in his property. You kind of own it, but he kinds of having a responsible of it. So that's how this is not zakatable. And once it is come back into your possession, then of course you have to give zakat of the amount, whatever the amount is. Similarly, the amount forwarded as a deposit for rent or any other services is also non-zakatable. So you have given extra payment towards your house, or you've given extra payment towards your rent, then that's not zakatable because this is just the rent that you have sent forward as an extra payment. So let's say you pay 3 months rent and zakat is due today. So that 3 months rent that you have given, that's not zakatable in your account. Why? Because you've already given and that's going to be utilized in the future. Okay, so we'll stop right here, inshallah. Any questions as what we have discussed until now regarding the type of zakatable items and the type of zakat that you have to give in which type of merchandise? No questions, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.